Hi there. Welcome to the Emydex production planning system demo. The Emydex production planning system is designed for production planning of primal deboning, primary slaughter and deboning plants for next day or future planning. And it basically takes your inputs, which is carcass stocks or bought in third-party carcass stocks, or indeed your existing finished goods box stocks as inputs, and matches those to your sales orders, whether known sales orders, forecast sales orders, are stock orders. So essentially the process is you balance sales orders against your carcass stocks and input stocks. You then schedule that plan onto the floor and do some capacity planning to check that you have the necessary resources to fulfill the plan. And once you're satisfied that the plan is balanced, scheduled, and capacity checked, you then basically produce a set of works order instructions to feed to the factory floor execution system. So before we jump into the system, there's a number of setup files and definitions that need to be created first. So we have the notion within Emydex production planning of processes and process targets. So these are the various stages of your production processes. So for example, here in this example, you can see that I have an input process that is process 10 into boning. And we have two eligible outputs from that, or process targets. That is primary deboning or fresh packing. So from into boning, the two eligible routes through the factory are into primary deboning, which will then move on to further processing and packing, or we can move straight into fresh packing. Then to move from one process to another process, we also need to set up on the system a number of eligible jobs. So for example, a saw cut break, a hand break, a value break are a number of eligible jobs to move from primary deboning jobs. So if I just jump across to the Emydex system now, you can see that we are in the processes tab on the Emydex client, and we have all our processes set up here. So you can see process 10 into primary deboning, process 80, which is fresh packing, and process 18, which is primary deboning. So we've set up all our processes. Now we need to link them together. And to do that, we use the process available targets tab. So I just switch across to that tab. And you can see here now that basically I'm going to choose the process in process 10, which is into primary deboning. And you can see I've already set up, there's two eligible targets, target 18 and target 80, as we had shown on the demonstration slide here. If you wanted to set up some other outputs, say for example, if you were saying that one of the outputs is fresh box stock, I could basically just move that across. But I'm going to take that away as it's not relevant. So we have set up our processes and we have linked them to their targets. Now what we need to do is to actually establish and set up the jobs that will allow you to move from one process to the other. So if I just click on the list here and I just get rid of this filter to show you, here's the complete list of jobs. In this instance, there's nearly 2,000 different types of jobs that can be performed within the factory. If I just do a filter on process 10, you can see that the eligible outputs are there. Saw cut break, hand cut break, and a value cut, hand cut, etc. And if I click on any of these just to show the detail behind those jobs, you can see that we have a number of variables to set up, including the input line speed, and these are important for when we go to do scheduling on the calendar and also for capacity planning. Input line speed, the line spacing, output units, belt speed, calculated line speed. So a lot of the parameters that need to be set up so that we can do scheduling and capacity planning. We also have for each job our inputs and outputs. So our input to this particular job is a whole carcass, and the expected outputs are threefold: the haunch, which we expect to be 34%, the front 40%, and the saddle 26%. And you can see that this varies by the different types of jobs. So if I switch back to the hand cut break, you can see that the percentage splits are separate, are different. We have a 40% expectation for front, 26 for saddle, and 34 for haunch. So now we've set up our processes, our targets, and our jobs. We're just about ready to start planning, but firstly, we need a couple of other inputs which are already on the system or can be pulled through from a third-party ERP. So we have our, in this case, in this example, it's a lamb, a deboning plant we're planning for, and there is a lamb chilled inventory showing the breakdown of our existing raw material carcass stocks, broken down by destination, or grade, or category, or quality attribute, whatever way you want to segregate your carcasses by batch type. We also then have an inventory of boxes, which is your finished goods box stock, which is to hand to fulfill your sales orders. And as I mentioned earlier, then we also have purchase orders in the system, or pulled from an ERP, which is future expected arrival of third-party stock, whether it's carcass or in box stock from third-party suppliers. So they can be factored into your production planning model also. These are all the inputs on the left-hand side of the balancing screen. On the right-hand side, then we match these to sales orders, and these can be known sales orders, they can be forecast sales orders, or indeed they can be stock orders. So we have our inputs on the left-hand side, and basically our outputs, our sales requirements on the right-hand side. There's a number of other setup files, including the clue file, which is your product file, as well as different types of batch files, but these are all your data files for setup. So now that we have the system configured and we have all our inputs, raw materials, and we have all our outputs, the sales, we can now move to basically our daily production planning screen, which brings everything together. So you can see here on the top left-hand side, we have our sales orders, as well as if your sales orders on the system, as well as our purchase orders. We also have visibility of our carcass stocks, which we can break down by batch. And down the bottom, we have basically all our existing plans that are on the system. So rather than creating a plan from scratch every time, we can use templates and tweak the inputs and the outputs, but basically all the jobs are balanced from left to right and right to left, and we just change the inputs and the outputs. So I'm going to now start a new plan. There is quite a lot involved in building your first plan, so I'm going to start a plan, and much like on the cooking shows, I will then abandon that and show you, here's one that I prepared earlier, which will make a lot more sense when you see that it's scheduled on the calendar. So the first thing I need to do is just give the new plan a name. So I'm going to call it Plan 211. I'm going to save that. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to produce different plans. In this instance, we're going to do it by batch. So for the first plan I'm going to do today, it's going to be for Welsh. And when I choose Welsh, what that does is it retrieves from the system all the carcass and box stocks for that batch category, which is Welsh. And you can see here on the left, I have a number of categories of carcass stock broken down by the destination grade. So these are different quality attributes. And on the right-hand side, I can see my sales orders for the Welsh production batch. That's great. So I have my inputs on the left and my outputs on the right. So I'm now going to edit this plan and I'm going to balance it. And let's say, for example, that we're going to start with our critical and priority order for the day. And let's say, for argument's sake, it's for Welsh shoulder. That's the priority order that we want to fulfill. So I'm actually going to work backwards from the sales order for Welsh shoulder. I'm going to match it to the applicable and relevant carcass stock. I'm going to consume that to fulfill the order, and then the question is, what do we do with the leftovers, with the leftover carcasses? We obviously don't want to freeze those, we want to maximize the value, so I'm then going to work them forward and match them to other sales orders. So start by working backwards from sales orders to inputs, raw materials, and then work that forward, and then backwards and forwards until you have a balanced plan. So working backwards through the factory, I'm just taking the Welsh shoulder and I'm working this backwards. Need to enter the quantity. And for the purpose of the demonstration, I'm not going to fulfill the whole order. I'm going to choose a quantity of 183 so that there'll essentially be 100 left over that I'll then work forward. So I've matched that. I've worked backwards to a grade 1 finished product, which would be on your packing end of the factory. And again, working backwards to further processing. Again, I'm going to choose the 183, stick with the same quantities. I will explain in a minute what this probably makes more sense when I work it forwards. So I'm working through processing, and now I'm working back into the start of the process, which is the primary break. I'm going to choose the hand cut break, 183. And now for the final part, I need to link this primary break to the input stock. So I just need to find the relevant carcass stock here, which is the top one. So there you go. So we've now matched the Welsh shoulder sales order all the way back to the carcass stock with the destination ampersand. And you can see that I've consumed 183 of the 283. So the question is, what do we do with the remainder? You'll see the color coding. The greens tells you that all the inputs and outputs are balanced and matching exactly, whereas the yellows are telling you that you have leftovers that need to be consumed. I'm going to now take the remaining 100 carcasses from this kill destination ampersand, which is in the Welsh batch, and I'm going to work this forward. So I'm going to work into primary deboning, and I'm going to match this to the job that I'm going to match this to is a value cut, hand cut job. So I'm going to work that forward. I'm going to say, yes, the quantity is 100. I want to use up the remaining and scroll down. So we've now split that remaining 100 carcasses into 100 fronts, saddles, and haunches. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rib saddles and I'm going to work that forward into a primary deboning job, which is a saddle best end 7 rib. Again, we require 100 of those. That's fine. And now I'm going to take the outputs. There's 3 outputs from that, and I'm going to take the best end, and I'm going to work that forward to a graded product. Now it's 200 because it's been split further, and the 2 outputs there are grade 1 and grade 2, and I'm going to take the grade 1 product and I'm going to pass that forward to its target process, which is vac packing, and the job I'm going to choose is job 816, which is a specific type of job. Matching that forward. There's my finished product, and now I'm going to link that to the actual sales order for the Welsh best end, which is just on the right on the screen. And I'm going to say that the quantity is, well, there's 160 required. I only have 100, so I'm going to put in, I'll put in 110 just to show that it should give me a red sign to say that we have used. There you can see it's gone red. So basically, there is only 100 available, and I've told the system 110. So again, that's my choice if I want to stick with that and override the system. But it's very visual to the planner to know where there is shortages and overruns. So now that I have a balanced plan, the next thing that you would do is you would move to the scheduling tab to actually take those jobs and put them onto a calendar on the factory floor. And again, it's linked. So I have, again, two process 10 jobs. The first one was for the Welsh shoulder. And basically, if I take that job and I put it onto the calendar at 6 a.m., it knows that the follow-on jobs, what time and where and when they should take place based on the parameters I set up in the job file. And my second job, I'm going to put on the calendar for 7 a.m. And that basically has scheduled everything. From primary deboning, it's also will take care of further processing and trim sort, etc. It's at this point here that I'm going to abandon this plan and revert back to a plan that I created earlier to show what a balanced plan looks like. Here is a balanced plan. So if I work all the way down, forwards and backwards, we have a nice balanced plan, lots of greens, some reds, but I'm satisfied with that. So just to show you what a fully scheduled production plan looks like, click across to the scheduling tab. And there are all the primary deboning jobs scheduled nicely onto the calendar, all the further processing jobs, trim sort, and then I can look for capacity planning purposes to see, do we have the resources necessary to complete this plan, so I can look at the throughput on the vac pack and packing stations at their various time intervals, and it'll basically highlight for me where we have exceeded any of the limits within the factory, so I can make a decision as to whether add extra resources or to further tweak my plan. So once the plan, as I mentioned, has been balanced and scheduled in the diary, and also checked for capacity planning purposes, the next step in the process is to create my set of instructions to the factory floor, what we call production works orders. Once they're saved, I will then release this to the factory floor, to the manufacturing system on the factory floor for execution. Thanks very much for listening. As I said, it's a short summary of our production planning demo. And if you'd like to see this in more detail, or if you have any questions, please follow up with our sales team. Thanks very much.